Okay, I'm going to go back at the square, and I'm going to ask you, should black take the queen? Now, white to move, and it promotes a pawn to a queen. This is a very dangerous position for black on the surface because, one, this rook cannot move. It can only take the queen. It cannot do anything else. So the only move that rook could do is to take the queen. And the question is, should it? Also, this rook is looking fairly vulnerable. Because of this. And also the king is pinned in. So if the queen takes the rook, then unless the queen itself is taken in some way, then it would be checkmate. Simply because there's a queen there pinning. There's a risk of a queen moving there in the future. There's a risk also of a queen also if it does get there and there's nothing stopping it, then later on it would be checkmate. But that was the plan. It wasn't quite ideal, but that was the plan. So there is a risk that the knight being pinned in and not being able to move. Okay? As part of a longer plan, maybe. So it is a threat. It is a serious potential threat of a checkmate. The question is, should black actually take the new queen or not? Believe it or not, black quite correctly did not bother with it. Instead, black decided to sacrifice their rook. They moved their rook down, check. The rook was taken. The queen then moved down to take the bishop. Checkmate. Something to beware of. Even though this rook is pinned by this queen, so it cannot move at all, that does not prevent it from being used in a checkmate there. So even though I've pinned the rook so it cannot actually move, it could still theoretically protect. It can still protect a queen there. Even though it is pinned. That may be something that beginners may not know or fully appreciate, because they may think, well, I can't move the rook up and down because the queen's stopping it. But no, it can be used in a checkmate. You could not use it if it was a different piece. If it was a different piece, you could not use it to then take that piece. If this had been, for example, a rook or anything else, you couldn't then move this to take it, because it would be protected by because the queen would be stopping it. But in the exceptional case of a checkmate, you can use a pinned piece here to protect another piece where, because I could not move the king because it's protected by that, even though that can't move because it's pinned by a queen. So something to bear in mind for beginners, okay? Just because a piece is pinned like this, it does not mean it cannot be used to protect another piece in a checkmate. And that was how I lost the game. Okay? Right, now I'm just going to show the game from the beginning. Not that it's brilliant, but there you go. That was part 2 of the King's Indian, but not completely because I didn't move the knight out. Most of this is not really exceptional, to be honest. As simple as here, they are threatening checkmate. So you will notice that here and here they are threatening checkmate. So I moved my knight out to protect that pawn, to stop the queen moving onto that square and checkmate happening. They decided straight away to take away that knight, still threatening checkmate, now threatening checkmate again. I moved the pawn up to stop the checkmate threat. They then decided to castle, which can, as I said, pin them in later. This is something that I was thinking about, a possible checkmate based on the weakness of that square. So the idea would be to move my bishop just behind the queen, and then threaten the queen to move to take the pawn near to my opponent's king. They threaten my queen, not a problem, move it out of the way. It looks as if I'm just taking the knight, but in fact I'm actually trying to position it in just behind the queen. Again, it looks like I'm just moving the queen, but I'm still keeping it along the same diagonal. Now, although that move doesn't look lethal, I'm now threatening checkmate. I'm threatening mate in 1. They do the only sensible move and stop it. I then threaten their queen and take the pawn. They decide they'd rather have my knight. Now I'm threatening to create a second queen. they move their rook. This is where I had a plan of pinning their queen in. If they hadn't done that, because I showed you what happened afterwards, I would have had a better time. But I'm showing you what happened. My idea was to trap their king. They took that. I promoted it to a queen, and you know what happened next. At this point now I lost, which you saw at the beginning. So there you go, guys. 2 queens isn't always better than 1. Going back, if they hadn't moved the queen where they did, what could have happened? Let's supposing they just did something that wasn't too important, like and I had moved this up again. Let's supposing they had moved their queen there for some reason. I know these are bad moves for them. Oh, no, that's not actually a particularly good idea. No, okay, go back on that. Supposing they've moved their bishop there. It's a bad move, I know. Why would they do it? They wouldn't. But I'm just trying to show the idea. Now, let's suppose they had taken it at this point. This is now where it would be lethal for them. Because now, check, and there's nowhere for the king to go. The only possible moves they could do are to sacrifice the queen and or the rook, both of which will fail. So let's suppose they sacrifice the rook. They then have no choice but to sacrifice the queen. Checkmate. If instead they just sacrifice the queen instead, instant checkmate. So it was quite a lethal position because the king is pinned in. But, as I said, my opponent beat me to it. Fair play to them. Thanks for watching. Bye.